Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Edward Elgar Publishing Limited. Now they're our family business of independent publishers of high quality material for us within the legal profession, covering both legal research, legal commentaries and certainly information which is directly relevant for the practitioner. This book I found fascinating again because it's dealing with a subject which is extremely important in the 21st century. The title is a bit long, but it does give you the flavour of what's actually in the book itself. Central Banking and Monetary Policy in Muslim Majority Countries, and it's been written by Akhand Akhtar Hossain. The book's available as a hardback and as an e-book, and you can also get it available on the Elgar Online site. And I'll show you a bit of that in a minute when you look at the book itself. As I said, it's part of the Edward Elgar series, and we've given it the generic title again for this of another best friend from Edward Elgar, this time dealing specifically with banking and monetary policy, and specifically related to Muslim majority countries. That's the best way of explaining it without naming specific areas. Now in a moment I'll talk briefly about what we say about the book, and it's taken really from what the contents are. But this is the book itself. It's a hardback, you can see that. There's the spine and then there's the back. There is a certain amount of information on the back, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The book itself, I think, is very, very interesting. It's very topical, very, very contemporary. The index at the back is on page numbering, so you can find things pretty quickly. It's a detailed index as well, which I think is very helpful. Then you will find in this book, as is the case with many of the Elgar books, you've got a notes and then the bibliography at the end of each chapter. So in fact you can find the information, the references, quite quickly. And in this case the references are very detailed indeed, because what Mr. Hossain is doing is trying his best to justify the points that he's making. There is a very special reference there, dedication, which I will just leave for you to read, about the author's late paternal and maternal grandfathers. And then this is the actual front page itself, and we'll have a quick look at the book. That's the online side if you need to try to get online for it. There are 10 chapters. Starts off with an introduction and then it lists specific countries. I'll mention them. They're Bahrain, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Then there's a preface which is very important. It starts off, in the contemporary monetary literature there is the suggestion that Islamic banking and finance, IBF, orientated monetary financing systems make open economics more resilient, since equity-based banking systems cope better in the sense of behaving more stably and resiliently than the mainstream debt-orientated systems when an economy comes under pressure. Now that's one sentence, and it's a very long one, and there's a lot of content in it, but that is where he's coming from, and you can see there's a certain justification if you follow his train of thought as to why this might be an area that we want to pay a bit more attention to. We don't have to adopt it, but we pay more attention to it. And I do think it's an excellent contribution to the debate. That's the first couple of pages, and then the preface goes on from there. And he runs on a bit with the preface. Then there are notes with the preface as well. So actually, in many ways, it's more of an introduction than a preface, but there is notes and then references there. Then we have abbreviations, which I think you will find helpful in this area of activity, because a lot of the places concerned, BB, Bangladesh Bank, for instance, I would not know what some of these abbreviations are. You'll find the referencing helpful the abbreviations helpful when you go to the referencing and the acronyms that are used. It's another page. Then there's the introduction itself. And he talks again here about the economic performance of the Muslim majority countries over the past 4 decades, suggests that their performance has been comparable with that for countries that historically have found themselves at similar stages of development. And therefore we are looking at the global wide implications now of central banking and monetary policy as it affects a whole range of people. You can see from there we then go into some subheads all the way through. There's no footnoting at the bottom because all of the footnotes are at the back of each of the chapters. And then you've got quite a lot of tables, you see. This again is a very detailed table. I didn't find it the easiest book in the world to read, I have to say, but I did think that what they're looking at in terms of policy is something we in the West certainly need to pay much more attention to, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to review this book, which will, I hope, be on the web and in the journals. But certainly my wife and I thought this was an important book for us to make a comment upon and welcome because of its contribution to what is going to happen in this century. And certainly we're seeing the beginnings of it at the moment. I'm sure things are going to change dramatically in the next few years in any event. Let me just clarify and crystallise what's in the book from the contents that you can actually see readily on the web. What it says, it's basically an introduction to Islamic banking and finance across the globe, and that's why the countries that are selected, the 9 that have been selected, are quite helpful because they're the leading countries effectively. It strengthens the argument, of course, for low and stable inflation and rule-based monetary policy for sustained economic growth. Now, I don't want to go any further than that, but to say that some people might unkindly say it's trying to justify the whole of the system. Now, that's basically, I think the word justify is probably the wrong word to use. I think what it is, it's a document that explains things, and that's really why it's a great explanation for the way in which the system operates. Because frankly, to a lot of us, we don't understand the system at all. So, because it's based on rather different notions than the ones we are familiar with in the West. So I'm grateful that we actually have this for as a book for discussion. Although then Islamic banking and finance may have created some complexities in financial transactions, it remains consistent with classical monetary theory, and it has created opportunities for improving the infrastructure of both central banking and monetary policy for maintaining both price and economic stability. At least that is one view of it. And what the author has done here is he reviews key aspects of central banking and monetary policy in the selected Muslim majority countries that he's picked. They have introduced, of course, Islamic banking and finance alongside conventional banking since the 1980s. So we've got a few decades now in which to see how things have developed. Now let me just remind you of the countries selected there: Bahrain, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Now we well know that one or two of these countries have got very substantial problems in any event, both political and economic, from the international issues that are taking place. But notwithstanding that, I think this is a tremendous contribution and, as I've said, an explanation as to where we are going with monetary policy. So while reviewing country-specific experiences and issues in inflation and monetary policy and analysing them from an historic context, emphasis is given by the author to the evolution of Islamic banking and finance and the consequent institutional developments for maintaining price stability, because the essence really of this, in fact, is the maintenance of some sort of stability. And I have to say, even in the West, take the United Kingdom, we have had very, very low interest rates and very low inflation for actually a considerable period of time, after many decades of very high inflation and very, very substantial economic difficulties. So there has been that element for a long period of time of stability, which may well end in 2016 as possibly interest rates in the United Kingdom rise. So we could then see changes, of course, within the European Union as well. Let me conclude by saying that what Mr. Hussain, Professor Hussain, he was actually an assistant professor, I believe, but what he is saying is this, that macroeconomic problems under these regimes that I've indicated he's selected are also highlighted in detail, and their policy implications are well drawn. And the volume, we think, will be of great value to students and researchers interested or involved in Islamic banking and finance, and of course the macroeconomic and monetary policy issues in Muslim majority countries. Certainly those that are selected, and probably others that have similar sorts of approach. But there again, it is a valuable contribution, very much what Edward Elgar do. Here's the book again, spine in the back, hardback, just opening it in the middle. A lot of information. This is on Iran, you can see the detail there. Again, some of these countries are countries that are having a lot of difficulties. Malaysia, of course, is not having quite the same difficulties, but you can see there huge amount of very substantial detail. So this is not just a book for lawyers, it's also, of course, a very substantial book for economic students, economists, and politicians. Thank you anyway to all concerned for another excellent contribution in this developing and fascinating area. Bye-bye.